Last week, I preached about Isaac being saved by the voice of Yahweh and the compliant acts of his father Abraham, refusing to follow the gods of old who called for a sacrifice. Abraham changed the status quo of his time. And Isaac went on to live 180 years, the Bible tells us. That's the same number of years of existence our church is celebrating today. A nice little coincidence tying us into last week's story about the ancient followers of the God who is love. And our history's important. Today's reading from the book of Job indicates as much. One of Job's friends, Bildad, wisely instructs Job on the importance of history. He asserts that we must look to it to learn. Though your beginning was small, your latter days will be very great. For inquire now of bygone generations and consider what their ancestors have found. For we are but of yesterday, and we know nothing. For our days on earth are but a shadow. Will they not teach you and tell you and utter words out of their understanding? History matters. And the Apostle Paul points this out. He wrote in Romans 15, "We who are strong ought to put up with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. Each of us must please our neighbor for the good purpose of building up the neighbor. For Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the insults of those who insult you have fallen on me. For whatever was written in former days was written for our instruction, so that by steadfastness and by the encouragement of the Scriptures we might have hope. May the God of steadfastness and encouragement grant you to live in harmony with one another, in accordance with Christ Jesus, so that together you may with one voice glorify the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Welcome one another, therefore, just as Christ has welcomed you, for the glory of God." The Apostle Paul. We've had these wonderful bulletin notes in July that were put together by Janet about our history. And Kim wrote a wonderful article in the newsletter that also appeared, I'm happy to say, in the Mount Vernon News on Thursday. It's about our congregation's involvement in social justice. And I've been writing and talking about history of the church too. It's not just very interesting, but it matters. We stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before us. We are instructed, shaped, formed, and influenced by our past. And the history that we create shapes and influences the future. To paraphrase Bildad, each generation needs to inquire of past generations and consider what our ancestors found. Church community needs to do this. To borrow from Paul, church is in the business of building up our neighbors. And history is for our instruction, to help us to do so. We've heard and we've read how our church has a passion for love and justice since it started. We have that passion now. Today I thought it would be fun to see and meditate on some of the history of our church, mostly in photos from the past. And later, Janet's going to be leading walking tours of nearby sites that relate to this church and its history. And I'm going to take us, and she's going to take us on I'm going to take us on a tour of photos and information mostly about the buildings and the pastors that I found through the Knox County Museum, over at our public library, and in some of the documents published and kept by the church. You have to give me a moment. I'm moving stuff down and I'm going to start a PowerPoint. Our church's first minister of the church in the throes of anti-slavery beginnings was B.W. Higbee. There's no known photo of him, but a note on the wall in our hall says this about him. One of the students who left Lane Seminary in the exodus to Oberlin. Medium in stature, strong in physique, energetic in body and mind, spiritual and evangelistic. 4 years of militant service. Reverend Higbee. I'm going to insert other pastors' pictures along the way, and my prayer is that we thank God for this pastor and the congregation that served with him, for the blessing that they gave to this community. This is Reverend Edward. We thank you. Would you turn those all off, John? Yeah, barely. Our church began in a barn near Bangs 180 years ago yesterday. Our first church building in town was where the Mulberry Methodist Church now sits. We occupied that now gone building from 1835 to 1867. This is a picture of it. In that church, we began as the Free Presbyterian Church until we became the First Congregational Church in 1849. It was in this first church building that large quantities of supplies were prepared for the North during the Civil War. Here's Reverend Strivey, Reverend Leonard, Reverend Monroe. And in 1867, we sold the first church, and we moved into the library. This is the old library building, and we stayed there for a year until the new building that we presently occupied was finished. And it took over 3 years to build this building. And after that 1 year in the library, we moved here in 1868. These are the oldest pictures I could find. This is Reverend Burroughs. And although there's a 1950s rendering in the parlor of the early church showing a brick facade, as well as notes in the archive suggesting the stucco did not go over the bricks until 1916 when the spire was taken down, early photographs of the church that I found suggest that perhaps the stucco was at least on the front of the building earlier than that. This is a colorized picture. I love that. This little post is still here. This is my favorite picture of the church. This is Reverend Hall. I went to the Knox County Museum and I found on their website a bunch of views from the street that show glimpses of the church way back when. You can see the spire right there. This is looking from Main Street north. Most of these pictures don't have dates on them, but we know the spire came in 1916, so all these shots were probably 100 years or so or more ago. You just look for the spire. It's one of the highest landmarks in town at the time. This is my favorite one. Here's Wilson's, still here today. Here's the church. Here's the Civil War monument. And then no one showed me this picture when I was doing the candidate stuff here. It's a lot of snow. They used to pile it out in the middle of the street, unlike today where they scrape it all out so the sidewalks were clear, but they piled it out and then they would take their sleighs and go up the middle of the street apparently. No one told me about this either. There's a huge flood. and you can tell it's so because you can't really tell, but this is a horse and a buggy up there. So here's some more pastors in the post-Civil War period. This is Reverend Bosworth, Reverend Strong, Reverend Turner, Reverend Dickinson, Reverend Mead. All these pictures are on the hallway by my office, and I just took pictures of the pictures. This is Reverend Houston, Reverend Freeman. And here's a picture. Our church is right here. This corner is Sugar and Main, it appears. This used to be the YMCA building. Clearly it's changed. And we're looking downtown. Here's someone in a horse and carriage. Here's the Civil War monument. There's another one, the same view. This is our sidewalk. And this is actually looking north. This is the church right here. See the building? Some of this is like detective work finding it, and this is where the retirement home is now. And these are little horse tie-offs. Pretty cool stuff. This is looking south from, I think, like around Pleasant Street. This is the tower, obviously, looking at the church. And here's two views from the cityscape. If you go out in the winter to Foundation Park, you can sort of see this. Right here's a double train trestle where it is now. This is our church steeple. These two church steeples are no longer here. Pretty cool, huh? They colorized this. Here's a picture from probably on the top of a building out that way. Here's our church. Here's Reverend Pike. This is the note that I was talking about. In 1916, there was a fire, lightning, I guess, a couple. If you look around town, there are very few churches with spires on them. I think they all got hit by lightning. Anyways, it was taken down in 1916. And you can see, originally they had these pyramid stacks on top of the tower. They also accented the painting different. This stack is still here. You go out and look, but these have been taken down. It's a beautiful building. This is Reverend Ulrich. I read somewhere, and I put this in a couple of things I wrote. I took it out because I couldn't remember where I saw it, but he was an early civil rights leader and preached on it. And I can't verify that. I remember it. I remember Ulrich standing out as someone very early on talking about that. This is Reverend Drexler, Reverend Hindley, Reverend Philippi. Some folks here remember him. Reverend West. Here's another picture. This is from the 1940s. You can see the women dressed in the 40s. That's it at night, I guess. This is a lot of ivy, and a number of people that were here in the 60s and 70s tell me they remember that. And actually, one day when I first got here, Ian was pulling ivy off the wall, so it still climbs back up. It's not good for the stucco or the bricks that people were taking down, although it does look beautiful. And there's a whole page dedicated to this upstairs. In 1867, realtor signs were put in front of the church as if it was for sale. It was a prank. And it looks like they taped off the front doors. And there's a number of pictures of renovations and work that's been done on the stucco. It's an everlasting problem. I only put two of them in here. This is from 1980. And I think this is from 2008 or 2006. You see the brickwork there. They've gone to cover it up. So. And there was a whole wing added in 1953, the wonderful education wing and the downstairs offices. It's part of it here. And this is what, here, let me put this note show. This is what, from 1881 to probably the 1920s, the interior of the church looked like. And it wasn't crooked like this when you walked inside the writing. The writing I had to pick writing or words. So here's a look at it. And if you notice, these are the old gas lights. Someone had to go up there and walk down these rickety steps. I've been up there and light each one of these every time they needed them with a gas light. And then there's this globe up here, and see the organ pipes. And it was redecorated, and these false pipes were put on the side. False pipes aren't actually unusual. The Episcopalian church over there has this beautiful-looking organ with these pipes above it, but they're false. There's electronic amplification systems behind it, just like there are here. Later here. See the accenting? It's all different. Painting. Pews are the same. A lot of churches back when this was made, they had fancier pews for fancier people, but this church did away with that, as I think Kim wrote and Janet noted. It's all been in equal place. And they hung this tapestry with a cross on it at one point. And then later in the 60s and 70s, this was going on. Yep. Some of you may even be in this picture. This is the only picture I could find looking out towards the congregation in the more modern period. This is Reverend Leaf. We go through a bunch of pastors here. Reverend Dunwald, Reverend Wilson, Reverend Ledoux, Reverend Dresch, Reverend Wells. I had a coffee with Stuart and Gail last week. They said they sent you their love. What pleasant people they were to meet with. Reverend Wicks, Reverend Elliott, loved his last name. Reverend Murray. I've met with Keith a number of times. I know you guys know him really well. What a lovely, wonderful man he is. Reverend Reed. I wanted to make sure you were awake. This is, yes, how I see myself. And you know, people think that the church is the building and the pastors, but really it's the congregation. And here's some modern pictures. I took these a week or two ago. I love this space. It's beautiful, and it's filled with all these wonderful people. These are children here from way back. Here's a 1940s, late 40s picture, and they used to gather out on the steps and take pictures, I think, every year. These are just wonderful. All these people are parcel of our history and who we are today. Now this is getting closer. I think this is Charlotte and Larry, and that's you, John, right? Yeah. Sometimes you wear that same shirt.
That was last week.
And this is my all-time favorite congregation. This is Easter of this year, and you all saying good morning to each other. So that is the tour.